Hey guys, in 1942, in the deepest throes of World War II, America's most brilliant minds were tasked with an impossible goal: to create a weapon that could end all wars. A force so powerful it would rewrite the laws of physics and the rules of international conflict. But to build it, they needed to build something else first: a secret, fully functioning city, complete with a high school, a shopping center, and bus routes, all hidden from the world behind barbed wire, machine guns, and a lie so complete that even the people who lived there didn't know its purpose. Imagine waking up one day in a beautiful new house, in a brand new town carved out of the Tennessee hills. You go to work every day, doing a job involving complex machinery, but you have no idea what the final product is. Your mail is censored. You cannot tell your own family where you live. Your next-door neighbor, who may be a world-renowned scientist, is known only by an assumed name. If you ask too many questions, you disappear. This is the true, astonishing story of Oak Ridge, Tennessee, the $1.2 billion metropolis that sprang from a dream and a desperate need, becoming the beating, nuclear heart of the Manhattan Project, a city that for a few crucial years was literally scrubbed from the map of the United States. The genesis of this secret city was less a scientific breakthrough and more a desperate race against time. By 1942, intelligence reports suggested that Nazi Germany was rapidly advancing its own atomic research. The prospect of Hitler possessing a nuclear weapon was the ultimate nightmare scenario for the Allies. President Franklin D. Roosevelt and Prime Minister Winston Churchill made the monumental, terrifying decision. America would stake everything on winning the race for the atomic bomb. The effort, codenamed the Manhattan Engineer District, or simply the Manhattan Project, was perhaps the greatest mobilization of intellectual, industrial, and financial resources in the history of warfare. But for a project of such scale and such terrifying implication, secrecy was not just a priority, it was existential. The enemy, and even the American public, could know nothing. The first challenge was finding a location. It had to be massive, remote, and have specific geological features. Brigadier General Leslie R. Groves, a formidable, no-nonsense engineer with a reputation for getting things done, he had just overseen the construction of the Pentagon, was put in charge. Groves drew up a list of demanding criteria for the primary site. Vast size. It needed to be large enough to house multiple colossal, first-of-their-kind industrial plants and a population of tens of thousands. Remote location. It had to be far from major population centers to minimize risk in case of a catastrophic accident, which, given the experimental nature of the work, was a very real possibility. Abundant power and water. The atomic separation processes were incredibly power-hungry, requiring more electricity than New York City. The site also needed access to an immense, continuous source of cooling water. Excellent transportation. It had to be easily reached by rail and road to transport the massive amounts of material needed to build the facilities. Groves and this team ultimately settled on a 59,000-acre tract of land in the Clinch River Valley of East Tennessee. This area, known as the Elza community, was a collection of small farms and family homes nestled in the rolling forested hills. It met all the technical criteria. The Tennessee Valley Authority, or TVA, provided unlimited hydroelectric power, the Clinch River offered the water, and a major rail line ran nearby. In the autumn of 1942, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers arrived. The residents of Elza were given a stunning, non-negotiable directive: evacuate immediately. The acquisition of the land was brutal in its efficiency. Farmers and families, some of whom had held the deeds to their land for 100 years, were given days or weeks to pack up their lives. The Army used the power of eminent domain, and compensation was often meager, sparking resentment that would echo for decades. The official explanation provided by the government was intentionally vague, claiming the land was needed for a new federal dam project. It was a plausible lie, given the TVA's visible construction across the state, but it was a lie nonetheless. Within weeks, thousands of acres of farmland were fenced off, protected by military police, machine gun nests, and a 24-hour patrol. The entire area, roughly two-thirds the size of Manhattan, was effectively declared a no-fly zone and a no-go zone for civilians. The construction effort that followed was a logistical miracle. When the army arrived, there was just a few dirt roads and a handful of homesteads. By 1945, the site, now officially known as the Clinch Engineer Works, or CEW, contained 10,000 acres of industrial plants, a labyrinth of factories larger than anything the world had ever seen. 30,000 temporary barracks and apartments to house the workers. A fully functioning city center named Oak Ridge, complete with a high school, elementary schools, 9 cafeterias, 7 drugstores, a library, multiple movie theaters, and a fleet of over 300 buses. The workforce swelled from a handful of engineers to over 75,000 people at the peak of construction, making Oak Ridge the 5th largest city in Tennessee at the time. The vast majority of these people were unaware of the city's true function. Construction crews worked around the clock, in shifts often reaching 24 hours straight, battling the mud and cold of the Tennessee winter. The speed of the construction was dizzying. Barracks were often built in days, and entire neighborhoods sprang up in a week. Workers were recruited from across the country, promised high wages for vital war work, and transported to Tennessee by train. When they arrived, they were given an immediate, chilling briefing. Loose lips sink ships. You are here to work. You are not here to talk. The city of Oak Ridge was the support structure, the camouflage, and the home for the true mission, which was housed within 3 immense, incomprehensible industrial complexes. These weren't mere factories. They were cathedral-like structures of steel, pipe, and concrete, each designed to perform one specific, painstaking task: separating the fissionable material uranium-235 from its far more common sibling, uranium-238. This separation was the holy grail of the atomic effort, and it was a task so difficult it was likened to finding a single specific grain of sand on a vast beach, and then building an entire industry to accomplish only that. The 3 plants were the largest building in the world under one roof when it was completed. KNT-25.
K-25 was a colossal U-shaped structure stretching nearly a mile long. The process it employed was gaseous diffusion, a highly theoretical concept. The idea: convert the uranium into a highly corrosive gas, uranium hexafluoride, and pump it through thousands of miles of incredibly fine, porous barriers. U-235 atoms are infinitesimally lighter than U-238 atoms, meaning they would diffuse through the barrier slightly faster. The reality: the process was so inefficient that the gas had to be passed through these barriers thousands of times in a row, requiring a vast, complex cascade of pumps, pipes, and control systems, all housed within that mile-long building. The amount of power needed to run the compressors was staggering, consuming over 600,000 kilowatts of electricity. The sheer scale was incomprehensible. Thousands of workers, mostly young women recruited from rural areas, walked the vast corridors of K-25, monitoring gauges and turning valves, often unaware that they were processing the raw material for a world-ending weapon. They were told they were purifying materials for Navy smoke pots or synthetic rubber. If K-25 was massive, Y-12 was surreal. This plant was built to house the calutrons, which were essentially giant, highly advanced mass spectrometers. The idea? Ionize the uranium, accelerate it through a massive magnetic field, and exploit the tiny difference in mass between U-235 and U-238 to separate the 2 isotopes into different collection bins. The problem? These massive magnets required tons of copper wiring, a strategic metal desperately needed for the war effort. General Groves solved the impossible problem with the legendary audacious solution. He borrowed 14,700 tons of pure silver bullion, enough to fill the back of a train, from the U.S. Treasury at West Point, New York. The silver was melted down, drawn into thin wires, and used in place of copper for the Calytron magnets. For a time, the largest known stockpile of silver in the world was housed in a secret factory in Tennessee, being used to split the atom. The plant was operated primarily by thousands of women recruited in a similar fashion to K-25. Their job was to observe dials and make minor adjustments. They were called Calytron girls, or operators, and they were so effective that physicists later confessed the women, by following their instructions without questioning the underlying science, often outperformed the highly educated scientists in running the finicky equipment. While K-25 and Y-12 were focused on uranium, a third facility was focused on the other fissionable element, plutonium. Just a few miles from the main city, the X-10 graphite reactor was built, a revolutionary piece of engineering and the first true industrial-scale nuclear reactor in the world. The idea? Irradiate rods of uranium with neutrons to transmute the U-238 into a brand new, man-made element, plutonium-239. This element would power the second type of atomic bomb. The design? A huge block of graphite, 24 feet high, wide and deep, with thousands of channels for uranium slugs and cooling air. It was a terrifying, unknown process. Every single aspect, from the radiation shielding to the remote handling of the radioactive fuel, had to be invented on the spot. The X-10 reactor, built in less than a year, was the proof of concept for the even larger plutonium production complex that would be built at the third main Manhattan Project site, Hanford, Washington. It was a triumph of engineering under pressure, and its first successful operation in late 1943 confirmed the viability of the plutonium route to the bomb, doubling America's chances of success. The citizens of Oak Ridge were living in a true paradox, an advanced, modern city where every aspect of life was strictly controlled. The first rule was the code of silence. A strict, militarized culture of compartmentalization was enforced. No one was allowed to discuss their work, their neighbor's work, or the purpose of the city. The famous slogan of the city was ubiquitous. What you see here, what you do here, what you hear here, when you leave here, let it stay here. The sheer irony was the size of the secret. With over 75,000 people knowing pieces of the puzzle, the key to secrecy was ensuring no single person could assemble the whole picture. An electrician in K-25 didn't know what was flowing through the pipes. The janitor in Y-12 didn't know the purpose of the massive magnets. The Calytron girl didn't know she was enriching the most dangerous material on Earth. While the entire effort was focused on defeating the Axis powers, a more insidious enemy was also at work: Soviet espionage. The Soviets knew about the American atomic program almost from its inception, thanks to highly placed spies. The secrecy at Oak Ridge, while effective at compartmentalization, was not foolproof against a determined foreign power. The city's massive growth required an equally massive influx of workers and contractors, providing cover for agents. One of the most astonishing true stories involves the spy George Koval, an American-born Soviet intelligence officer known by the code name Del Mar. Koval used his fluent English and American upbringing to great effect. He was drafted into the U.S. Army, and due to his educational background in chemistry, was specifically trained as a health physics officer, the personnel responsible for monitoring radiation safety. Crucially, his assignment took him directly to the X-10 graphite reactor in Oak Ridge and later to the Dayton project in Ohio, where polonium, a highly toxic material used as the initiator for the bomb, was being produced. Koval was given access to the very heart of the operation, including detailed information about the production rates and the physical structure of the reactors. This intelligence was invaluable to the Soviet Union's own successful and much faster post-war atomic bomb project. Koval remained undiscovered and returned to the Soviet Union in 1948, his identity as a spy not confirmed by the U.S. government until decades later. In a parallel reality to the top-secret industrial work, Oak Ridge was also a fascinating social experiment. It was a planned, utopian-style city built almost overnight. It was the first company town run not by a corporation, but by the U.S. government, through a private contractor, the Stone and Webster Engineering Corporation, which ran the city itself. The government provided a high quality of life to keep morale high and to ensure workers stayed put. There were excellent schools, community centers, and a remarkable number of clubs and social activities. The city was a melting pot, drawing workers from the rural South, the industrial North, and a large number of African American workers who were crucial to construction and operational labor, though they were segregated into separate housing and faced significant discrimination, reflecting the social norms of the era. The military nature of the project and the necessity of its mission somewhat muted the racial tensions, but a highly nuanced system of segregation was in place at Oak Ridge.
An effective system of segregation was built into the very design of the city. By early 1945, the vast machinery of Oak Ridge, K-25, Y-12, and X-10 was humming with increasing efficiency. The impossible was happening. Grams of enriched uranium and small quantities of plutonium were being produced and shipped, often under heavily armed escort and in complete secrecy, to the final assembly site, Los Alamos, New Mexico, the laboratory where the bomb itself was being designed. The workers of Oak Ridge, who had lived for years in a state of suspended reality, doing work they couldn't name in a city that didn't exist, were about to have their collective consciousness shattered. On August 6, 1945, the world changed forever. A lone B-29 bomber, the Enola Gay, dropped a single weapon on the city of Hiroshima, Japan. The bomb, known as Little Boy, was a uranium-235 device, the material enriched at the huge K-25 and Y-12 plants in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. When the news hit the closed-off city, the revelation was catastrophic and glorious at the same time. The shock. The thousands of ordinary men and women realized what their secret project truly was. They weren't making smoke pots or refining rubber. They had been working, sometimes within yards of highly radioactive materials, to create the most devastating weapon in human history. The pride. Mixed with the horror was an immense surge of patriotic pride. Their impossible work had contributed directly to the sudden, definitive end of the bloodiest war the world had ever known. The slogan of secrecy was replaced by one of triumphant, grim ownership. Within days, the Army Corps of Engineers made an unprecedented announcement. The Clinton Engineer Works was the largest facility of the Manhattan Project. The city of Oak Ridge was real, and it was the place where the materials for the bomb had been made. The city that didn't exist was suddenly on every front page in the world, the silent, anonymous heart of a new, terrifying atomic age. The gates were figuratively, if not entirely literally, opened, and the world peered in at the secret Tennessee town that had altered history. The story, however, was far from over. The initial shock gave way to the deep, long-term consequences. The immediate geopolitical fallout, the health crisis among the workers exposed to radiation, the incredible effort to declassify the science and transition the site to a post-war research facility, and the enduring legacy of the thousands of tons of silver that had to be tracked, accounted for, and returned to the U.S. Treasury.